Hey, I'm Connie Malamed and I'll be your guide through this presentation, Learn to Write Effective Audio Scripts. I would like you to meet Misha. She's doing her first internship as an instructional designer. Her boss asked her to write an audio script for an e-learning course, and they hired a professional talent to record it. Misha was quite excited about this opportunity. She spent all week writing storyboards for her script. She'd never written an audio script and she wasn't sure about the format, but she had a flair for writing and was pretty sure she'd done a good job. However, she began to get nervous when she found out her boss was too busy to review the script. There was nothing she could do, so Misha submitted it to the voice talent without getting help from anyone. As you might expect, the voice actor was a little upset when she read the script. It wasn't in a script format, so it took her longer to get through it. There were tongue twisters, long sentences without a place to take a breath, and technical terms with no pronunciation guide. It wasn't Misha's fault. She wasn't given the mentoring she needed for her first audio recording. I don't ever want something like this to happen to you. Whether you're new at writing audio scripts or very experienced, we can always grow and improve our writing skills. So let's look at when we use audio in learning. We use it for voiceovers. That's when the speaking voice of an unseen narrator is heard. We use it in e-learning, videos, and games. Videos when you're not seeing the talking head. We use it in dialogue when we show conversations between two or more people, especially like in e-learning scenarios. We use it in unspoken thoughts, when the character's unexpressed feelings and reflections are heard, and you can have a lot of fun with that. And finally, now we use audio in podcasts, which of course are just digital audio files available for download. And by the way, there are so many different terms for voice talent, and these are some of the ones that I use interchangeably. So don't get confused. They're just all the same thing. They mean the person who speaks the audio script. Before we even get into writing, though, we need to know and understand what it means to learn with audio. What are the best practices from a cognitive science perspective? Now, in 2001, Richard Mayer came up with, as a result of his research, came up with the cognitive theory of multimedia learning. And that's what many of the principles are based on. And in this theory, it assumes that humans have two channels for processing information. An auditory or verbal channel, which processes auditory input, and a visual pictorial channel, which processes visual input, including graphics and text. So you want to keep this dual channel processing in mind when we look at the principles of multimedia learning, the best practices. The first one is to just cut it down. People learn better when extraneous words, pictures, and sounds are excluded rather than included. The next one is to avoid redundancy. People learn better from graphics and narration than from graphics, narration, and on-screen text, but not in all cases. And this comes back to that visual processing channel. If people have to look at graphics and read text while narration is going on, it overloads the visual channel. But then again, there are many times when you may need at least short phrases or bullet points, and that's when the narration or the topic is complex. Then it's helpful to show short phrases in sync with the audio. Also, for accessibility purposes, you should always have optional on-screen text of your narration for people who have a hearing disability or for people who may not know the language very well, or for some people who might love to read the text. Another principle is giving the user control. People learn better from a multimedia lesson presented in user-paced segments rather than as a continuous unit. By giving the user control, they always have the option of rewinding and replaying. Are you ready for two more? Here we go. Informality. People learn better from multimedia lessons when words are in conversational style rather than formal style. And when we talk about writing, it's good to remember that we tend to write in a formal style, but we speak in a much more informal style. And this is kind of a bummer for some people who love to use background music, but Mayer and Marino found that background music and extraneous sounds can detract from learning. Of course, every rule can be broken if you have a very, very good reason and you're being very intentional about it. For example, I might put a sound effect or background music at the start of an e-learning course, but then stop it before we get into the instructional part. So what I would like you to do now is just reflect. What key message do you get from the research conclusions? Stop for a moment and take it in and think about those conclusions. I'll show you them again. Cut it down, avoid redundancy, give users control, be informal, and avoid the background music. So think about what key message you get from all of these research conclusions. Now let's look at the different types of scripts that you may want to use for writing audio. I'm going to show you a 3-minute animation that I made for a client that uses a lot of audio and different characters. The topic was to explain to people what a medical visit companion is, and that is someone who volunteers to take people on medical visits, people who may not be able to handle it themselves. So in order to spice up the topic a little, I over-dramatized it and used the theme of a soap opera. Here goes. It's 3 minutes.
Medical Visit Companion Diaries. Starring Gloria Glitter as Darlene and Brad Beaming as Mr. Goodhart. Episode 1. What is a medical visit companion anyway? For the first time, Darlene's father, known to all as Mr. Goodhart, will need help getting to his doctor's appointment. Darlene isn't quite sure what to do at the visit. Her father has always been independent, but now he needs help getting around.
Should I go into the exam room with him? Should I answer questions he can't answer? I don't want to upset him.
Suddenly, Darlene remembered a brochure she'd been saving. It was something about taking people to medical appointments. Perhaps she knew this day would eventually come. Reading the brochure, Darlene discovered that she was about to become a medical visit companion. That's a family member, friend, or volunteer who goes along with a patient to an appointment with a healthcare provider. The brochure said that medical visits are better for the patient and doctor when there is a companion present. Darlene relaxed a little. she started to feel better about the whole thing.
I guess there are benefits for Dad if I come along. I'm not just driving him to the doctor. I'm giving him support so he won't feel anxious about the visit. And I can help explain things to the doctor if Dad wants me to. Maybe I can make appointments for him too, now that he seems less organized.
There are benefits to becoming a medical visit companion too, Darlene. It can improve your well-being and satisfaction with life. You will feel included and needed. Don't miss the next episode of Medical Visit Companion Diaries. Can Darlene overcome her struggles with getting ready for the doctor's visit? You'll have to tune in to find out.
It's very common to write your audio script directly into a storyboard. Storyboards can look a million different ways. This is an example of one where the audio is written in the notes portion of a PowerPoint storyboard. This is a typical 2-column script that you may want to use for video or animations. You use this type when there are no interactions, the kind that you might need in a storyboard. In these 2-column scripts, you often have the audio on the left, the visual or video on the right, and that's the script that I used to send to the client to review what I was proposing for the animation, because the animation is kind of like a video. No matter what kind of script or storyboard I use for development and for review by clients and team members or audience members, I always create a new script for audio recording. And I'll show you 2 examples of that, and it makes it much easier for the voice talent to read the script and to record it. It makes the whole thing go smoother, whether I'm working with someone in the office whose voice sounds great or with a pro. And I want to show you the different things that I will include in a narrator's script. I include the technical instructions if the voice talent is recording it themselves. If you're in a studio, you give that information to the engineer. I also include the key to the script convention. So I like to use italics for emphasis and the acting notes in parentheses. The other part is there's a file name for every file. This is exactly how I want it broken up. It's helpful to provide the audio script of what will come before that particular voice actor begins to record. The only thing is I like to make it in a lighter color so that they don't record somebody else's part. I put stage direction in parentheses, and there's the italics for emphasis. Voice talent that I've spoken to typically like 1.5 line spacing because it makes it easier to read. And here's another type of voice talent script. So rather than breaking it up into individual files, in this one, I'm working on one long file because it was going to be an educational podcast. So in this case, the file name is up there, the stage direction, and the context. Again, this is what one of the other characters will say. This was a dialogue, and I was going to insert the audio myself. Other conventions that I use and that you should probably use is you should create a key for the acronyms so that rather than pronounce Instructional Systems Design ISD as ISID, the voice talent knows to pronounce every letter. And you can come up with your own conventions. Just let them know what they are. Add phonetic pronunciations in parentheses. Some like it right in the script. Others like a list of difficult words at the top of the script and how to pronounce them. Sometimes you really need a pause because you are doing an animation or you want to display some graphics or text, and that small pause gives you just enough time, a nanosecond, to display it so that everything can sync up well. It's important to have page numbers so when you're working with people and reviewing the script, you can use the page numbers for reference. And finally, always ask the voice talent for their preferences. And even when you're working with someone in your office, you can say, how would you like these pronunciations? Would you like them at the top of the script or directly in the script? So those are some of the key things that you would want to put in your script. And now for the feature presentation. Let's talk about writing audio scripts. It's hard to tell someone how to write an audio script. I'll just show you my process. Of course, I review the performance objectives and content and make sure I have my head wrapped around it, because sometimes it can be pretty complex. Then I decide on the point of view that I'm going to take with whatever theme or approach I'm using, and the style that you want the narrator to project. I'll write a draft typically starting with the audio and adding key visuals as they come to mind or as I know of their existence. And while I'm writing, I hold two perspectives in mind. Of course, I mostly am thinking about the learner, but for an audio script, you really have to think about the voice talent too, and what will be easy to read, pronounce, and record. When we talk about point of view, your script can come from the first person, where the voice actor is actually experienced something as a character, so it could be I or we. It could be the second person, where you're speaking directly to the audience with you. Or you can use third person, where you have an omniscient view and you're using pronouns like they, he, she, it. And in today's world, we are usually encouraged to use gender-neutral language. And then there are so many different styles. Perhaps if you have a faculty member speaking, you want it to sound scholarly. But if you're persuading someone, maybe you want to sound genuine or friendly. So there are so many different types of styles. This is just a small number of what you can decide to choose. The very first rule, I think, of writing an audio script is to write for the ear, not the eye. You've gone through many years of academic training where you were only writing for reading. So if you have not had experience writing for the ear, it's a whole different world. Keep that in mind as you write. You want to write like you speak. As you begin to get better at this, you'll begin to pay attention to how people actually talk. And you'll see, especially in conversations, that it is often not formal at all. In an audio script, you want to get to the point quickly. It can get very boring with long introductions. Always aim for shorter sentences. This isn't a rule that you have to stick to. Sometimes it's nice to vary the sentence length, but just as a general rule, don't get too hung up on this. A recommended length for an audio script is around 25 words. Again, don't be rigid, but if you want to have, a ruler to go by, you can go more than 25 words, less than 25 words, but just keep that in mind. Now, always use the active voice whenever possible. This makes your writing much stronger. And I know I've had trouble learning about active voice when I first heard about it, so let's review that for a second. Again, the active voice makes your writing stronger and again more direct. So the active construction, the subject performs the action. The voice talent, which is the subject, will provide you with their preferences: strong, direct, no question about what this means. Now look at a passive construction. In this case, the subject is not taking a direct action. Here we go. Preferences will be provided to you by the voice talent. So you can see how the first one at the top is so much more clear. Whenever you catch yourself writing in this passive construction, see if there's a way around it. And this is just absolute necessity. You have to read the script out loud. And I like to do it in several phases. The first time I correct the big errors. The second time I may tweak it and realize that some of these sentences are way too long, or it's difficult to pronounce these two words next to each other. So you want to tweak it, and by the third time you're really fine-tuning it for the learner and for the voice talent. Now, what about writing dialogue? I've written educational podcasts for clients where there were a few people talking. You may write dialogue for video or for scenarios. The first rule is write like people really converse. And you know what? People often speak in fragmented sentences. They may speak in incomplete sentences. They interrupt each other. They may just use one word. So start to really listen to how people talk so that when you write your dialogues, they sound natural and not stilted or awkward. You can use words to show the relationship between people. For example, if these two young women are friends, they're going to be speaking to each other as friends do, and they will choose words naturally that show their closeness and their friendship. Whereas if one of these girls were talking to a teacher, they may use a different vocabulary and have a completely different vibe. So use words to show the relationship between people. Another thing is select words that express emotion. We are all very attentive to stories with emotion. So if you want to say what this man is, put some words into his mouth and he's angry or getting down on someone, use aggressive, angry language. I'm not talking about over the top. But instead of saying he said, show it, demonstrate it with your words, with your choice of words. This is a great rule, and it's all about skipping the boring part. And what that means is start your dialogue when you get to the meat of the conversation. Instead of saying, hi Jack, how are you today? Fine, Sue, how are you? You can use a little background. Jack and Sue were having a disagreement about the user interface on some software. And it got heated because they're both competing for the same promotion. And then you go into their dialogue. I have a podcast. It's podcast number 44. That takes you behind the scenes with 3 voice actors, and I find it fascinating to see what they say. And Kim Handyside said, you can tell when a scriptwriter has taken time to read it out loud to help make it sound conversational. So we always want to try to make all of our dialogue and all of our monologues sound as natural as possible. Now, not all of you will be using professional talent, but you know what? Even when you're just working with someone in your office who may be recording for you, you don't have to hire them, but you do need to prepare them. So here are some tips for that. Whether you're going amateur or pro, consider the tone, the style, and the accent that you need. You can go to these websites, and I tell you which ones come next. At least these are ones in the US and Canada. And review the professional narrators' demos. And you will also find that probably in sites around the world. Any professional narrator is going to have a demo. Consider whether the person can create more than one character. This is a way to save money. If you can hire a voice actor that can do 2 or 3 characters and really sound different, then they don't bother charging you for that initial 1 hour, which often they do. So you're essentially bundling 2 or 3 people into one. And when you're choosing voice actors for dialogues, make sure that the voices really contrast. Don't pick 2 men with deep voices. Often the best way to get that contrast is to use a male and female voice. These are some of the sites that I know of for finding talent. And you know what? Upwork should also be in here. And a final rule, you must prepare and educate the talent. You know why? Everybody wants to do a good job. They want to sound believable. So when I hand a voice actor the script, I don't just hand it to them. I have a meeting and we review it. I go over all my notes and give them some context, tell them what it's about. How would they ever know what it's about? We work in such obscure topics. So that's it. Thank you. I hope you found this session valuable.